episode of Juanito Learns, and today we're gonna try to learn how to pick a CMS engine for generating JAMstack-friendly sites. So just a small overview of what CMS does. Let me see if I can draw it right here. PowerPoint. Yes, I am using PowerPoint to do a sketch. Basically what we have on a CMS is that you're gonna have a program called a CMS. That's your program, and then you basically output from that CMS. You're gonna output files that represent. Actually, it outputs a file, a site, an actual site, your internet site. So your CMS, that stands for Content Management System, it's just one way of building sites, especially public-facing sites. Now there are different kinds of that a CMS can do that. Some of all the older CMS typically will have generate the sites dynamically and runtime based on the information stored by the CMS. So what ended up happening was your runtime environment was all that. So your runtime environment, what running your server that was also serving the site was both the CMS and the site. So every time there was a request coming in to your server, it will have been served by the CMS, generating that content for that request. The request, it will come back to the browser. It's going to go browser. So with static CMS, static generators, static sites generators, or what happens is that your CMS or your static, or static site generator, what will happen is you will generate your site. Because remember, the sites and at the end are just HTML, and that HTML could be generated at runtime or at some point in time. So it will generate the site, and that site is what the browser will be looking at. So for those types of programs, you don't need a server anymore that could run the CMS. All you need is a server that could run the static files, those files that represent your site. And this server could be, depending on the site that gets generated, it could be a very dumb server. If this CMS or static site generator will generate pure HTML files, then this web server, all it had to be is a very dumb web server that just serves files. Now, you probably know this already, but running a static site, all you're gonna do is be able to see something. You'll be able to interact with the site. So that's why there's this movement called the Jamstack for a few years ago, where it basically, I'm gonna try to distill a little bit, but basically says that this site, your static site, is gonna be mainly static HTML files. Static HTML files that live in the server, so you can still use a server that is dumb and cheap for your for the most part of your site. But your same site, because HTML, it might have some JavaScript. It might have some JavaScript in the site, inside the site. The site will have some JavaScript that then in turn could call a different server. And this different server will be smaller because all it does all it's doing is generating, is serving the specific purpose for the JS, for the JavaScript. So most of your site will be static, but that one piece of the JavaScript that's running in the site, that is also running, again, because remember that the JavaScript will be running on the browser, that JavaScript will then call from the browser, it will call that API. And that API is what will do any of the runtime functionality that your site might need. For example, retrieve latest grades from a DB, from database, or posting grades to a database. So actually I'm going to delete the other one because retrieving the latest grades, this thing could in theory call a DB in the background, from on-premise, from your own computer, and that DB could have, the DB of grades. So you could generate a static version of a snapshot of what those grades look like and push those dumb files to your server. Now, this server might not be that dumb. This server might be able to have some sort of protection. Very, very simple protection. Simple authentication. Auth stands for authentication, where whatever the user is visiting, it can tell what static files that user can access to. But again, what it's accessing is just pure static files. Yes, you do have some authentication done by the web server, but that's it. Everything else is static. And then that's two static files. If they need to push something back, they can have that JS, that JavaScript running and calling that API, which in turn can then, will be able to talk back to the database. And then the cycle goes and goes and goes on. So that's what that's why the static generators and CMS or CMS that can create static sites are so powerful. So what we're gonna be doing now is we're gonna try to find what's the latest one? Which one is the one that we probably should be using for our next static website? Okay, so the goal is, again, because this server is dumb, it can be fast and cheap. So we're gonna look for services that can be dumb and cheap, that will allow us to host that and also that could potentially give us authentication services. So we're gonna go to JAMstack.org first because they have a list of site generators that we could use. And again, they have some more information here about what they are, and I would highly recommend, to read this, what the JAMstack is all about. So we got two things here, a site generator and a headless CMS. It's been a while since I've read about this, but I believe that headless CMS is more powerful site generator. Basically, it allows you to do, it's more powerful. A lot of them are open source, as you can see. Here it's been sorted by GitHub stars. A GitHub star is basically the number of stars that are given to the project inside GitHub. GitHub, again, is a site that hosts the open source projects. As you can see, this one, the number of stars are right here, 40,000 stars. We got open source headless CMS, and we got site generators. So which one should we pick? Well, I don't know. That's why we're here. We're gonna check a couple of them. I'm gonna check some open source uh, site generators and some open source headless CMS. So this one says this one's API driven. So let's take a look at one of those and see um, what they're about. So Strapi. Let's go to Strapi first. Hmm. So I guess it takes a database, and using that you can start doing that. Role access authentication. Oh, that's for the CMS, so who can add or remove. Now let's go to the site to see if we get more info about it. Design APIs fast. Manage content easily. Headless CMS. Build apps fast. Building self-hosted, custom server, and performant content API has never been easier. No matter what data structure is the best for your business, you can easily define models and add relations to create rich layout experiences. Well, that's interesting. I don't know what that means. Seamless write, edit, and manage any content type. Once you have created content architecture, you can start telling engaging stories. Allow cross-functional teams to deliver content faster, no matter your industries, use case, locations, devices, and channels. Okay, so once you build the app, easily build apps and digital experiences without the distraction of CMS complexities. Focus your talent on what matters. You can integrate individual best-in-class services by third-party vendors and connect any framework of your choice. Consume a Strapi API from any client using REST or GraphQL. So you create your content and then it can be queried using an API. So I think it's front-end frameworks. So you guess you still need a front-end framework. Also, you know what? Let's go back to the site generators. Before we do, let's go to Ghost and see what is it about. Ghost, turn your audience into a business. Wow. Oh, media creators. Transform clicks into contacts. Interesting. Well, I guess there are many choices. Oops. Well, let's look at Netlify CMS. Netlify CMS. A CMS for static site generators. Give non-technical users a simple way to edit and add content to any site built with a static site generator. Netlify CMS is released under MIT license. You go with Netlify CMS. Well, that's interesting. Let's see what it is about. Let me close the other ones. Open source content management for your Git workflow with any static site generator for faster and more flexible web project. Get the speed, security, and scalability of a static site while still providing the convenient editing interface for content. Oh, that's interesting. And integrate part of your Git workflow. Content is stored in your GitHub repository, alongside your code for easier versioning, multi-channel publishing, and the option to handle content updates directly in Git. Netlify CMS is built as a single-page React app. Create custom-style previews, UI widgets, and editor plugins to add backends to support different Git platforms APIs. Choose a template that's pre-configured with a static generator and deploys to a global scene in one click. Okay, well, let's get started. Let's see, start with a template. You can add Netlify CMS to any existing site. Is to start with a template. Well, we're gonna stop the video right here because the next video will be how to learn Netlify CMS. It's a pretty good one. I mean, it was third one over here. Let's read some more of the benefits here. It has a good community, and I guess you can deploy it to Netlify. Where do we deploy that? Well, let's look. So we got this, but it allows us to choose the stack generator. So we got a Hugo, Gatsby, Middleman, Preact, Next.js, Element started. Okay, so we're going to look first at the site generators. I guess the CMS, the Headless CMS, you know, they work together with the site generators. So we're gonna work together with them as well. If anything, if all else fails, then we're just gonna create our own CMS, which actually is not a good idea, given that there are so many static site generators that we could use out of the box, and they are open source, and then we could extend. Okay, Next.js. Oh, I like this one. Next.js, a framework for statically exported React apps. Support server-side rendering. That sounds good, I think. Maybe it has some cool features. Hugo, a fast and flexible static site generator. Gatsby. I didn't like Gatsby too much last time I tried. It looked very complicated. And Jekyll, oh, that's still this one, an oldie but a good one. Jekyll. I used to many years ago. I used to work on that. Next, a minimalistic framework for serverless Vue.js applications. Let's go with Next.js and see what it's all about. Next.js is a minimalistic framework for server rendered React applications. Okay, what does that mean? It means that, well, let's go to the site, because I mean, what does that mean to be server rendered? Hybrid static and server rendering, TypeScript support, smart bundling, route prefetching, and more. No config needed. Oh, I like that. Web image optimization. Well, that's cool. Internationalization, internationalization. Analytics. Hybrid. Pre-rendered pages at build time. Again, that's what we were saying about pre-rendering. Your generator pre-renders into DOM files that a DOM server can serve. Or request time in a single project, so you can mix and match. Add and update statically pre-rendered pages incrementally after build time. Oh, that's interesting. Fast refresh. Built-in CSS report. Code split and bundling. Well, let's look at this feature. Data fetching. That's not the feature. I want the feature for static rendering. So we get all these options to get the data from. But I want to see how they do the server-side rendering. Oh, by default, pre-renders every page. Oh, that's good to know. Yeah, there you go. Next.js generates HTML for each page in advance. That's good. Instead of having it all done by client-side JavaScript. Two forms of pre-rendering, static and server-side rendering. Static generation. Build time. Yep. Well, I guess this is what I'm going to pick for the next tutorial. I will see you in the next tutorial. The next tutorial will be Juanito learns how to use Next.js. Next.js. We'll see you then. Thank you.